Hello, everyone. Welcome yet to another episode of the New MDs 42. We've been doing this for almost 3 years, and this is a fabulous pre recorded episode with Dr. Sabine Hazan. She's one busy gal, but you'll watch the podcast, and then I'm sticking around to answer any questions you might have. So please post your questions. We will be on four platforms: YouTube, Facebook, X, and Rumble. So thank you to our producer and Tempo. Let's get the show started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this fabulous episode number 42 of the New MDs, Mothers, Doctors, and Scientists. I'm Dr. Michelle Perro. I'm an integrative pediatrician. I am CEO and co-founder of GMOscience.org, a 501c nonprofit based here in Northern California. There I am, and asking for donations, and I haven't even started yet. And also a proud author, and I'm going to say proud because, boy, this book was a beast to birth, long labor, actually long pregnancy, making our children well. It's focused on nutrition and homeopathy, two of my favorite topics, why they're sick and how to get them better. But I'm really excited to introduce today my friend, my colleague, someone I admire and who has changed my thinking, Dr. Sabine Hazan. Welcome.
Thank you.
Today.
Thank you.
And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Sabine and our show today. This show is entitled, I'm reading it right here on another screen, The Missing Shield, Why 1 in 4 American Babies Are Starting Life in a State of Biologic Crisis. I know you may say, wow, that's kind of dramatic. I love the drama because we're in a state in the world where we need some drama. And Sabine and I are going to talk about the hidden or maybe not so hidden epidemic when we talk later about DC. Sabine, what's going on? So Sabine, her credentials are enormous. Gastroenterologist, that's not an easy road, people. Microbiome, a founder and owner of this amazing just research center, and you can tell us more about that, as well as a pioneer in research and some of my favorite topics, which we're going to get into. I'm Dr. Poopy Diaper, but Dr. Hassan has taught me, and she's Dr. S.H. blank T. We'll talk about your book too. So Sabine, please welcome us to our audience, our listeners. This is a recorded episode today. It's not live because Sabine is so freaking busy. Please look. Her book, Let's Talk SHT, Disease, Digestion, and Fecal Transplants, which I love. And please show Sabine's website. And we're going to show it again at the end of the show on Microbiome. And folks, if you haven't visited her website, please do. So, Sabine, tell us about yourself, and then we're going to get started in today's conversation.
Well, I'm a gastroenterologist, but more research gastroenterology. I've been doing clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies for the last 3 decades. I started my fellowship at University of Florida doing 1 year of research, just entirely research, and really doing clinical trials. I was at the beginning of Remicade, when Remicade was in clinical trials for Crohn's disease. And then pretty soon Remicade became for psoriasis and arthritis, or similar to Remicade, right? So, pharmaceutical companies tend to go from antibiotics, and everybody copies antibiotics for everything, and then biologics for everything. And then when fecal transplant or fecal poop came on, I kind of went rogue because I started seeing various protocols of microbiome pills, poop pills on my desk. And I said, wow, we're in the poop business in capsules, and we have no idea what the hell we're doing in the microbiome. So I really started utilizing laboratories that were out there. You'll remember a company by the name of Ubiome. Mm-hmm. So Ubiome essentially was, when we tested the samples, we discovered that they were not reproducing. In other words, I would test the same sample today, the same sample, 2 different names I gave it, and I would have different results. Ooh. With the same stool sample. So I started asking the questions of, well, how is that possible? And why are they giving these lab tests to patients? And what are patients making out of those lab tests that are not validated or reproducible, right? I mean, for example, you have a stool sample and your stool sample says you have an overabundance of E. coli, but then the same stool sample says you have an overabundance of Bacteroides vulgaris or Akkermansia. Well, which one is it? Do you have Bacteroides? Do you have Akkermansia? Do you have E. coli? How do you start a treatment like that, right? So, and you and I both know in medicine, you need to have a reproducible lab, right? It's like if I go test my hemoglobin at one lab and it's 6, I need a blood transfusion. But if I test my hemoglobin at another lab and it's 12, I don't need a blood transfusion, right? So to me, that was the main concern. So I was at a midlife crisis, you could say, where I was done with doing, thousands of colonoscopies. I was done with doing hundreds of clinical trials for pharma, and I just wanted my life to mean something. And I sort of said to myself, I really should test the microbiome. I really should try to figure this out, right? Because I have so many years having done clinical trials. I know so many secrets of pharma and products, and I know the guidelines and I practice with the guidelines, that I felt, maybe this is time for me to really understand the microbiome as I'm getting older, right? I may have a disease in the future, right? And so I started Progenobiome really with the interest. At the beginning, I kind of thought, well, this could be a business, right? But then the more I got into it, I said, this can't be a business. We're too early in this, what's Bacteroides vulgaris? What's Akkermansia? Is that a good bug? Is that a bad bug? How can I sell a stool sample to a patient without me understanding the microbiome to begin with, right? What am I selling? Well, how am I treating them? What am I treating, right? And we know, you and I both know, there's a whole world of probiotics out there. And really, if they were working, we would not have an increase in autism. We would not have an increase in Alzheimer's, neurological, etc. So there's definitely something that's off, right? There's something that's off in the pharmaceutical where we haven't reached any cures. And there's something that's off in the natural nutraceuticals where we're still seeing diseases progressing, right? And so really, I started Progenobiome as a research lab. I will be lucky if I find or discover something I could say, hey, you know what, this is something I'm going to go with, clinically, but also, bring in some, business to pay off all the expenditures and everything that we've incurred doing all this research. Yeah. But I think, right now it's so important to do the research unbiased, to basically, see the data the way it is, because, medicine, healthcare, we're all going to be patients. And I feel like we need to understand medicine better. Well, and we need to be righteous. We need to say it like it is. We need to basically be upfront with the patients and say, look, I don't know. That's, whenever patients come to me, and when they came to me with autism, my first thing is, I don't know what I'm looking at. I have a gut feeling that I need to look at you I need to look at the kid with the family. Let me analyze that, right? But I didn't really know what I was looking at the beginning when I started this. It wasn't until COVID that it kind of started lighting up for me,
A couple of things come to mind about what you're saying. Number one is laboratory reproducibility. Whether you're checking someone's hemoglobin for a low red blood anemia, or whether you're looking at the microbiome. The microbiome, there's so much that is unknown. This is an unexplored science. And you have straddled the two, unfortunately, parallel and not synergistic communities of mainstream medicine, Western medicine, conventional, whatever you like to call it, and my world, integrative, alternative, complementary. I hate all those words, but I call myself integrative. And those two don't necessarily overlap, because mainstream practitioners do know very little about the microbiome. Yeah, maybe they know how to check for a parasite like Giardia in the stool, and mainstream sampling is not great. But what you're saying may not be so great out in the integrative space either. So we have this explosion of information with practitioners who don't know how to manage it, test for it, diagnose it. And even if we did know how to test for it, what to do with it. So I want to pivot to this study, which rocked my world. And I want to talk about one of my favorite topics. And I'm going to tell you how you changed my thinking for like ever. And this was the Microbiome study. Are you familiar with the Microbiome study?
Yes.
So I read that study and I went, oh my God, for many reasons. And babies are now bereft of bifido species. It was like 92% and 25% had no bifido, zero bifido. So can you give us your thoughts a little bit about the Microbiome study?
And well, we actually showed that. I talked about it. I didn't publish it, but we discussed it on Epoch. I discussed it on Epoch Times. You know,
I listened to that with Jan Yakelak.
Yes. So I discussed it on Epoch Times, and I said,
"That was a great episode, people. If you haven't seen what Jan Yakelak, and Dr. Hazan, please watch that. Go ahead, Sabine."
Yes. So I discussed it with Jan, and I basically said, look, you know, my concern right now is before the pandemic, I was seeing newborns with a lot of bifidobacteria. And now, after COVID and the vaccines, I'm seeing a drop in bifidobacteria. And I think that probably me saying that kind of biased scientists that are listening and following me, because, you know, science is, we're following, right? We're following the person that's saying something, right? And that's the way it's always kind of been, right? We saw that. We saw that during COVID, loss of bifidobacteria. We still see it at an enormous rate. I will tell you what I am seeing, which is really concerning, is the disappearance completely of bifidobacteria, where out of 4,000 stool samples, less than 5% have bifidobacteria. So let me just tell you, I'm saying this today. Some scientist is listening. They're going to do the data to reproduce what I'm saying, right?
Oh, please do. Yes.
But this is good because, yes, prove me wrong, right? So here's the thing. We are seeing a drop. We are seeing a disappearance. We are killing the microbiome of humanity so fast. And you could see the difference when you start comparing. So remember, our lab is not only looking at us, you know, as Americans, it's looking at the Italian that lives in Italy to compare it to the Italian in America. It's looking at the African in Africa versus the African in America, right? It's looking at tigers and lions on a safari. It's looking at elephants on a safari versus elephants in the wild, the microbiome, right? It's looking at the Amazon jungles microbiome versus, you know, China or Africa or America, right? So when you look at all that, you start seeing major differences. And the major difference is a lost microbiome, disappearance of microbes. The fascinating thing as I've gone in that hole, I don't want to say hole because it's not a hole, it's really a path. I've gone through this path of looking at bifidobacteria. What I've noticed is it's fascinating how loss of bifidobacteria was not just a problem of the newborns now in that study, but it was a problem of it's a problem of Alzheimer's. It's a problem of autism. It's a problem of diabetes type 1. It's a problem of Crohn's disease, Lyme disease, you know, cancer, invasive cancer, bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety. So when you long COVID, vaccine injured. So when you start looking at that bifidobacteria, and here's the thing, that's why a validated assay is important. Yes, you could see a drop, but how dropped is it? Is it 0? Or is it 5%? Or is it 20%? How dropped is it? Because if you have a drop of a 0, it's not the same treatment as if you have a drop of 1%. again, I'm going to bring it back to hemoglobin. You're going to test your lab. Yes, this lab and this study showed a drop in bifidobacteria of the kids. But how low is it? Is it to the point that they need a blood transfusion? Or is it to the point that we can manage them with vitamins, etc., right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to fine-tune the level of bifidobacteria where I could say with confidence, this needs a transfusion. This needs an implant. This needs a manipulation of the microbiome. This needs a killing of the microbes that are overgrown, finding the right microbe, because obviously, you know, what microbe, and also figuring out, you know, so I have an opportunity in my lab because we're cap and clear, but we're also, we do all these studies. You know, we have an anaerobic chamber. We are looking at studies. We collaborate with laboratories that do animal studies. We collaborate with laboratories that do in vitro studies. So at any point I can say, hey, here's a microbe. Can you test it for me and see what it feeds on and what it kills? What are we doing with antibiotics, right? When we have a urinary tract infection, we have E. coli, right? We want to know what's the sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm trying to accomplish right now. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to say, okay, at what level of bifidobacteria is it okay? And at what level is it not okay that the patient needs something?
So what I love about what you're saying is that this bifido, we're looking at numbers, and we can talk about how you do it because I'm familiar with your techniques, and maybe some of our geeky listeners want to hear about 16S and
I'm not 16S. I'm next to it. Yeah.
Your metagenomics, the
Yes.
metabolome. Yeah. We can talk about your technique. But what you're saying is that the terrain matters. When you're looking at bifido, you want the absolute number. Is it 0, 0.5, 10%? You want to look at the terrain factors. Who's hanging out with the bifido? Are they pathogenic? Who are their buddies? Are bifido paired with other beneficial microbes that can help boost it or lower it? So you're looking at to see what are the factors that we can assess in this terrain of the bifido homestead that could predict treatment? Would some vitamin C help? Some fructooligosaccharides, food for microbes? Maybe we got to do the fecal transplant. Maybe in the future, when you take ciprofloxacin for that, infection, you need a fecal transplant or probiotics designed to pair with the Cipro or the amoxicillin.
I think, in the future is probably going to be one of those methods of treatment, where basically precision medicine. That's what I'm trying to get us to. I'm trying to get us to the blood. It's interesting because let me just bring it back to the blood. When we did in 1810 or 1820, hemoglobin was created. They invented hemoglobin, right? Prior to that, people were bleeding and we had no idea how to treat them, right? Then somebody came up with the idea of hemoglobin. And then it took up until like 1860 where they started saying, you know what, a hemoglobin of 6 needs a blood transfusion, right? So that time factor, right? It took a long time to accept the hemoglobin to begin with, right?
Yep.
That's what I'm trying to get us to. And believe me, I'm fighting like this way, that way. I'm at the Senate. I'm fighting the retraction of papers. But I'm trying to move this train along because we don't have a hemoglobin in the microbiome space. We don't. So we know people have leaky gut. You know it. You've been treating these patients. We know from the history, patients losing their hair. They have leaky gut. They have acne. They have leaky gut. The reason pharma has been always utilizing the same products is because they understand one thing. All disease begins in the gut. And if you attack Crohn's, you can attack, acne the same way. You can attack, autism the same way. We've classified all these diseases, right? To say this is Alzheimer's, this is autism, this is Crohn's. And we've subspecialized all these doctors, right? Mm-hmm. But ultimately, where does it start? It starts in the gut.
Just like Hippocrates said, all diseases start in the gut.
Yes, and we've gone away from that. We've said, you know what? It's not the gut. Well, no, it is the gut. We're showing it at Progenobiome. When you see a leaky gut or gut dysbiosis in autism, and you see another one in Alzheimer's, and you see the same microbes, Alzheimer's, autism, you go, is autism the Alzheimer's of the young, and is Alzheimer's the autism of the old? You start mimicking, right? Then you start looking at autism and Crohn's disease, right? And you go, wait a minute, there's similar microbes in this kid. Does this kid have microscopic colitis underneath, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it autism, or is it an extraintestinal manifestation of Crohn's disease? Is the kid so now your head should be going, so wait, this is Crohn's because and then you do biopsies and you see microscopic colitis. So you go, this is Crohn's, but the kid is presenting with autism. I need to fix my Crohn's first before fixing the brain, right?
You know,
so this is why it's not so simple. Because
there's nothing simple about this. Sabine, when I started seeing the autism uptick in the early 2000s, they all had gut issues. And I went after the gut first, fix the gut, because of the gut-brain axis. And I don't even like to talk about the gut-brain axis. I like to talk about the gut-brain microbiome axis. Now you say, but Michelle, the microbiome is part of the gut. Well, yes, obviously, but the microbiome is its own organ and has its own role, own organ, and it works collaboratively inside this tube that goes literally from your mouth to the anus, to the end.
Let me just say, it's amazing to me when people just focus on this part or this part.
Me too.
Or the nose, and forget that the nose is supplied by blood vessels and nerves and lymphatics, and all that circulates very fast. So, I was at the hearing yesterday, and there was a question. Senator Johnson said, well, they lied to us because they said the vaccine stays in the deltoid, right? And he asked this oncologist, does the vaccine stay in the deltoid? And of course, she couldn't really answer because she's in this, conundrum, right? Of like, your association is supported by pharma. You don't want to kill the vaccine. You don't want to create vaccine hesitancy. So you don't want to scare people. You don't want to say it's a lie. But I spoke out and I said, nothing stays in the deltoid, because the deltoid is supplied by blood vessels. The moment you put that needle in, you've just went into blood vessels, nerves, lymphatics, skin, cellular material, fat. All that's getting that, right? So the idea that something just stays in the colon or something just stays in the brain is just wrong. The blood circulates. The moment the blood circulates, now if you're dead, maybe it'll stay in the colon, but the moment you're alive and your blood circulates nonstop is the moment that whatever's in the heart is in the colon. Whatever's in your lungs is in the colon. And by the way, you know where we see that? In emphysema patients, when you change their microbiome and they start improving their lung function. Why? Because you're changing the environment of the colon. They no longer have those microbes that are sitting in the lungs. And now the lungs are circulating and they're giving it back to the colon and into the septic tanks, right? Into your toilet. Well, that's what it's about, right? It's about, I'm eating a hamburger full of E. coli, and I'm either vomiting or I'm having diarrhea from that hamburger, right? The body is programmed to reject the unnatural and the toxic, right? But sometimes it's too overloaded and it cannot release the toxins and it cannot release the bad microbes.
There's a couple points I want to hone in on here and get you to talk about a few things. Number one is that people have to understand, we just mentioned the gut-brain axis in conversation, enteric nervous system, long nerve called the vagus. There is the lung microbiome axis, which we talked about during COVID. There is a brain microbiome axis, And there is a placental microbiome and there's a fetal microbiome. So there's a blood microbiome. Blood is not sterile because I do dark field microscopy. We see plenty of stuff floating around. People who are totally healthy, asymptomatic, they don't have infections, they're running marathons, they're fine, but the blood is not sterile. So we have many misconceptions in medicine that we are managing. One. Number two, yes, please.
Some people have an overgrowth of viruses in the blood, that are
virus,
hepatitis C, JCV, CMV, herpes. I mean, the moment you can test all that in the blood tells you the blood is not sterile.
It's not sterile. Okay, that's one. Yeah. Number two, is this a sidebar? Because I just learned that you were in DC at a hearing. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? Because this is hot off the press. Inform us, our listeners, about that.
So it's interesting. During the pandemic, one scientist and two doctors came up with the same conclusion, right? About these vaccines. First of all, we all saw these vaccines as not being vaccines, right? We felt this is a new technology. The moment they incorporate a new technology in these vaccines, it's no longer a vaccine, right? And we felt that this new technology could possibly create circulating proteins, and we just didn't know what these circulating proteins would do, right? So Dr. Alderi, who, by the way, has had hundreds of thousands of citations on his papers, written hundreds and thousands of papers, and is, head of oncology. He's part of the WIN Symposium, who is basically all the oncologists from all around the country are part of that WIN Symposium. He's one of the founders of that. He is a brilliant mind. There was a gene that was named after him, the WAF gene. He named the gene after him. He was behind the whole concept and thought on P53, right? And his whole work is about the P53 and how, if you could attenuate or improve, you could change, the outcome of cancer, right? So he has this whole direction of how he would like to see cancer treated. This doctor is basically, everybody respects him. Okay. And he's tremendously humble and he's tremendously critical. He's a critical thinker. Right. And, he came out with the idea of maybe the vaccine affects the P53. Right. And he said, could this cause more cancers in the future? Okay. Meanwhile, Kevin McKernan, who was a scientist who at the beginning I was kind of paying attention to his work because he seemed to know a lot about genomics. And then I went to a museum. I forget if it was in DC or if it was in Boston, but my feet were killing me. And I was sitting at this television screen about the microbiome. And here comes Kevin, in 1996, talking about the microbiome project and showing on the video in the museum all the samples of stools they were analyzing at NIH, right? And then Dr. Collins was speaking, and basically it was about a 25-year-old video. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy was on the original microbiome project. I need to pay attention to this guy because he obviously knows a lot of stuff, right? So he found a contamination of the vaccine. And when I got to know who he was, I really paid attention to his development because my stool test is basically needed his work in order to be developed, right? Wow. We all advance to science, right? Science is like a foundation. One guy adds a brick, another one, another. And it's kind of like a blockchain where pretty soon you find this story, you discover something, right? But my lab, my work, my genetic sequencing is thanks to his work initially at the Microbiome Project, right? So when I started paying attention, I'm like, wait a minute, this guy would not be coming out. He would not be risking his career and coming out with some fraud. He must have checked, validated, verified, reproduced the data. And then another scientist, Philip Buchholz, also reproduced the data. So I'm like, so there is a contamination with this virus, with this vaccine, right? And that's when I had already seen that the bifidobacteria was getting killed with the vaccine, right? But my brain started going, I wonder if it's the SV40. I wonder if it's particles of contamination of E. coli that are maybe creating a symbiosis with other parasitic microbes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they gang up to, maybe the spike protein goes into the blood, travels the blood, ends up in the colon, and maybe there it penetrates viruses, CMV. We've certainly seen CMV encephalitis post these vaccines. We've certainly seen herpes encephalitis. We've certainly seen JCV activated, Epstein-Barr virus activated. I have a guy right now who has like a ton of spike proteins, got vaccinated 7 times. He cannot get rid of his Epstein-Barr. He's bedridden. So I started testing, when you start kind of putting things together and you start with that hypothesis, maybe the spike goes into the blood, goes into the colon, penetrates a microbe, and then activates other bad microbe, kills the bifidobacteria, because your immunity is really, as I'm starting to understand it, is really the good it's a fight in the gut, the good microbes versus the bad microbes, right? And they're kind of fighting together. So maybe the bad is so overgrown that they suffocate, suppress, censor the bifidobacteria, kind of like the bad scientists that are suppressing the good, righteous scientists, right? Kind of like good and evil, right? Darkness and light, right? It's that balance, constant, right? So I think, and I've, it's not necessarily bad, because I don't think anybody is really bad. I think it's just an accumulation of bad that suppresses the good to not bring the balance, right? So I think, so when I saw Kevin, when I saw that, we all came to the same conclusion that there could be a risk for cancer in the future with these vaccines. I came to a different conclusion. I came to the conclusion that this is Pandora's box, and we're going to start seeing a lot more diseases. We're going to start seeing a lot more autism. We're going to start seeing a lot more Parkinson's, ALS, Alzheimer's, MS, cancer, because it all depends on what you kill. If you kill the bifidobacteria and you're predisposed to having cancer in the family, it's going to speed it up, because you've gotten these microbes in your gut from family members passed on, right? Eventually, you kill your good guys, the bad ones come up, and the disease starts progressing and you die, right? The process of dying is really the overgrowth of bad microbes and the suppression of good microbes. At least that's how I like to think of it. That's how I like to see it. I think when I look at people that survived COVID, that are still standing, that have not gotten COVID, they still have bifidobacteria. When I look at people that get recurrent C. diff, I'm like still in C. diff, but recurrent COVID, it's like having recurrent C. diff. You've killed your microbiome,
So this is important for me, because this really changed the way I've been ever since I read your paper on loss of bifido and the mRNA vaccine. I have not been able to think the same way. I mean, I've been looking at bifido and babies, the microbiome. Babies are my specialty. Love babies, love their microbiome. I do everything to support baby bifido, because I remind listeners 100 years ago, babies were a monoculture of bifidobacteria infantis, and now they're not. And this drives neurocognitive dysfunction in every sense of the word. But
not only neuro, but also, I believe, diabetes, I believe cancer.
So
the increased rate of neuroblastoma in kids is not.
So do I. So I talk about neurocognitive, and I'm writing a white paper now on bifidobacteria and ADHD. But where you got me going down, and I know you're not an expert on my world, which is glyphosate and other pesticides, but I want to talk about negative synergism. Now, we know about the COVID mRNA shot obliterates bifidobacteria. I know your study was small. It was so impactful, they went after you like gangbusters. And nobody has reproduced it. They don't want to know, to my knowledge.
No, actually, a couple of labs have reproduced that data. They just have not said that they didn't put it as blunt as I did.
Oh,
I
thank you for
said
making it blunt.
messenger RNA kills the microbiome. That was like out there. But I wanted to make an impact to kind of wake up humanity, to wake up the regulatory agencies, the FDA, to say, hey, guys, and my gastroenterologist peers, to say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. I didn't want to sugarcoat it. The other two labs, there was a lab in Italy and a lab in China who reproduced it. And they showed loss of bifidobacteria, but they don't mention it. They basically say, well, we notice a decrease. We suggest supplementing the vaccine with probiotics, but that's not going to help you, right? So
Makes me crazy.
there are ways to publish the data to make it politically acceptable. I just chose not to make it politically acceptable because of what I was seeing. To me, that was, when you see 5% of 4,000 patients, less than 5% have bifidobacteria in the gut. You go, holy cow, what's going to happen, right? When you see newborns born with 0 bifidobacteria, you start going, wait a minute, what's going to happen to this baby? When you see 1 in 12 boys in California having autism, my thought is not, oh, 1 in 12 boys, let's start the research. My thought is, what's going to happen in 100 years? Is it going to be 1 in 1? What's going to happen to my great-grandchildren? Are they going to be autistic? I'm working on this right now, not for me, not for this life, because it's not in my life. I'm working for the next generation of my great-grandchildren that are not going to be alive, that I'm not going to be alive to fight and restore their gut.
Me too.
And here's the thing. And I think that's why so many moms are onto this, by the way. And we've kind of all like had enough, and we're all speaking and we're all out there. Here's the thing. What happens when one-on-one kid becomes autistic? Who's going to take care of the people?
When they become adults, who's going to take care of them?
And then guess what? Humanity goes extinct. That's it. It's over. So an important finding during the pandemic was a great study that showed that bifidobacteria decomposes plastic. You know how I'm drinking from this plastic bottle?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not concerned, right? Because I've tested my microbiome. I don't have any microplastics in my gut, okay? But there are some people that I have bifidobacteria. I test my stools on a regular basis. I've done about 300 stool samples of myself. So I have great data there. But, unfortunately, I'm censored. I'm suffocated. I can't talk. I don't, so therefore, why would and I can't publish. And if I publish, I have to spend a year to stop the retraction of the publication. We've already had like about 4 papers retracted, and we've republished them. We've republished 3. There's a 4th one, but that took 2 years of my life. Who the hell has that? I should be publishing. So the reality is, with microplastic, is it a problem microplastic, or is it lost microbes?
So what you bring up to me is that, this keystone microbe is the key. It's a part of baby's existence. It's a part of the anti-aging movement, because we move away from bifido and other firmicutes as we age. But I want to ask you, and I know you've spoken about vaccines, and it's not supposed to be a vaccine conversation per se, but it has to be. When you have the theft of bifidobacteria from, say, mRNA technology, spike protein is particularly toxic, and why bifido is so important. And then I looked at all the other vaccines, routine childhood vaccines, not one study on the effect of routine vaccines on the microbiome. But then you add glyphosate. Glyphosate, we've known for the past 13 years at least, wipes out bifidobacteria and lactobacilli. We've known that from Monica Kruger's work, a veterinarian of all things.
Yes.
So we've known all about that. But what happens to children when they're exposed to an mRNA, breast milk, spike, the routine vaccine schedule, 72/5 here in the state of California, and glyphosate? It's a multiple synergism. It's a 3-pack hit. I'm writing a white paper now. I'm not going to publish it other than Substack, because no one's going to pick it up, by the way. So I would love to hear your thoughts about the multi-hit when we've got mom breastfeeding, eating conventional corn, filled with glyphosate in her breast milk, and she's taking shots, and the baby's getting shots. What could possibly go right with that scenario?
Well, I mean, you hope that we develop a resilience, but it's kind of hard to, it's so much hit on every level. I just, to me, that's like nuclear bomb to the gut, and only the strong will survive. But unfortunately, you know, um, I'm in the business of saving, of trying to save everyone. I'm in the business of, a patient comes in. I don't say, hey, you know what? Maybe you'll be resilient and you'll survive. I look at like risk factors. You could have diabetes. You need to lose weight. You could have this. You could do. So I think we're playing Russian roulette with humanity. We definitely played Russian roulette with humanity with COVID and the vaccine. I mean, this was a manipulated virus. And we're in the world of viruses that are manipulated now, by the way, because they have that capability of mixing a bacteria with a virus, or two viruses together, or two bacteria together. Here's the thing most people don't realize: you cannot patent a discovery of a microbe. Okay, so in other words, I discover a microbe and I want to patent that as to make it a business, right? You can't.
Mm-hmm.
But you can patent a creation. So in other words, I take a bacteria and a virus and I link them together. Now that's a patent. So anybody that uses my creation, they're going to have to come to me to license them from. They're going to license from me.
You're stepping into my world of genetically modified microbes and this lovely world of synthetic biology and precision fermentation, as industry would like to lead you to believe about that. I want to talk a little bit about that, because what you're talking about is, we know the microbiome is a collection of microbes. There's bacteria, there's viruses, there's protozoa, there's archaea, there's fungi, there's all kinds of stuff in there. Now we've introduced this genetically modified bacteria viral marriage, a phage. Remember, they're sexually promiscuous. There's a swapping of DNA happening all the time, little plasmids just swapping genetic material. Now we have these new microbes inhabiting our gut, not classified, patented, Correct. Making metabolites, which are materials that change our chemistry, because don't forget, we're living on the metabolites of microbes. It's called vitamins. They're called short chain fatty acids. But we don't know what these new little creations and bio creatures can produce. Can you talk to about? Because it makes me absolutely crazy.
Well, so let me give you an example. Okay. So if you go to Central Africa, to Zimbabwe, and I'll give you this example. I was on a safari and I was taking, the stool samples of animals, because I was just curious about what does the animal in the wild look like, right? Yeah. What microbes are existing in there. And I was basically the guide took a dung of an elephant and he holds it in his hand and he opens it, and there's tons of ticks in there. And I said to the guide, I said, how come is Lyme disease part of Zimbabwe? He goes, no, it's not a problem here. But meanwhile, the guy's like full of, he's touching full of ticks, right? He put the dung down on the floor and then he started preparing my food and he didn't even wash his hands. Okay. So what do you learn from that? Okay.
Don't eat the food. Don't eat the food is what you learn. Okay, go ahead.
No, actually, I did eat the food. I'll tell you why. Because you learn that we have become so sterile.
Oh, I know.
That microbes are not recognizing microbes. And therefore, what happens is that because microbes are not recognizing, the microbes in your gut, excuse me 1 second, I don't know what's going on.
Yes. By the way, Sabine Hazan is traveling and made out time from her busy schedule, because this is a woman in demand, to spend some time with us. So we are grateful here in the New England.
Sorry.
No,
I'm in a hotel room at
I'm
the
just explaining how busy
South
you are and
College.
how grateful we are that you're here. Please continue.
No problem. So the guy was like trying to do something here. Anyways, so so the bottom line is, what I wanted to say is, what is happening to this guide is that he's so in the environment that ticks are part of his are part of his microbiome, right? The phylum of spirochetes is part of his microbiome. So therefore, it doesn't recognize a tick as a foreign object. Now, a person that's been sterile their whole lives, and I say sterile because, antibiotics sterilize, alcohol sterilizes, so a person that's sterile has killed a lot of antibiotics, has killed a lot of microbes. And therefore, when they're exposed to new microbes, right? I'll give you an example. So I was the kid that was born in Morocco, and, I would play in the dirt and exposed to everything, and had probably a very diversified microbiome as a kid. And then I come to to Canada, and then I came to America, and, you have to get all these vaccines, and, I've gotten the MMR twice, and I've gotten a lot of things. So over the years, I've probably killed a lot of microbes, right? And so what happens is, when I went back to Morocco, an E. coli that I ingested from the water that was local to the water that I was drinking when I was a kid, right? I mean, I was drinking that water when I was a kid and I was fine, but that water now became toxic to me because I no longer have the microbes that I had as a child. It didn't recognize. So what is the function of the microbiome? The function of the microbiome is, and we saw it with COVID, is to go after a foreign object, a foreign microbe, right? Enemy approaching, bacteria, virus combined together, I'm going to release it, right? So if you'll recall, people had some vomiting, people had some diarrhea. That's your body trying to flush out the virus, right? The cough is also the virus trying to come out of the lungs, right? The nose, the sputum, the sputum's trying to get rid of the virus, right? So the body is conditioned to reject the foreign objects. So what are we doing when we manipulate is we constantly keep our bodies in a state of having to fight against itself to release microbes that are just foreign. So that's how I see it anyways. I could be wrong, but I'm waiting for someone to prove me wrong. Exactly. So I think we need to start relooking at microbes differently. We need to start not only saying, look, maybe we need moderation, right? Maybe we need, some microbes are good, some microbes are bad. Maybe they're good up to this level. Maybe they're good up, So in the olden days, I think diversity was a lot better than it is today. I think we've overdone it with vaccines. We've overdone it with antibiotics. That's what I'm critical of, okay? Sure, I mean, in the olden days, you could say, but the other thing is we've manipulated all these, we've manipulated the food. We put preservatives to give it a longer shelf life. We've manipulated the ground because we want more fruits and vegetables. So we're killing the soil so that we don't decrease our production. We are killing our microbiome, right? Because now we are living in a sterile environment. So we need to accommodate to this sterile environment. The problem with that is that eventually we're going to be like the Jetsons and wear these masks and not be able to touch the ground and the soil and the trees. And to me, that's the end of humanity as we know it.
Well, Sabine, I'm in your camp. This idea of our microbes helping identify self from non-self and going after these foreign invaders, and then having immunologic confusion because the invaders have changed. They're these synthetic hybrids, they're new invaders. We've lost so many species due to antimicrobials, hand sanitizers, glyphosate, the best antibiotic I know, electromagnetic frequencies, alter the microbiome, et cetera, ultra processed foods. And what I would love your thoughts on this. I hypothesize that, there's a microbe in the gut. It's another keystone called B. fragilis, Bacteroides fragilis. You need this particular microbe to activate vitamin D. Now, when you don't have this activation of vitamin D, your autoimmunity is potentiated because vitamin D is a key hormone preventing autoimmunity. So it's this complex. So even in terms of the development of autoimmunity, which is skyrocketing in children, I can tell you that, in adults as well, autoimmune disease, it's just shocking. I can see a 9-year-old boy now with Hashimoto's. That was unheard of, 20 years ago. Children with Hashimoto's, particularly boys, unheard of. So because of this microbial manipulation and loss of keystone microbes like Bifida, like B. fragilis, like others, we're now developing a lack of knowledge of self. We're losing our ability to know who we are, both in the physical, the microbial, and the metaphysical sense. And that's what I think you're referring to. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so first of all, it's not confirmed that B. fragilis is doing that, okay? And it's not confirmed that it's a good bug. I challenge to say it may not be such a good bug at a certain level. So I think that's where really we need more clinical, we need more data, we need, less mice studies and more human studies and more clinical. In the microbiome space, it's all about achieving a cure and going back and looking at what you did that changed. And that's why I say, I'm not so sure B. fragilis is what it's supposed to say, okay? It's kind of like the whole thing with acromencia, So, in order to attain a cure in medicine, you have to practice innovation. You have to have a good gut feeling of what you're doing, right? And you also have to be courageous because you're essentially doing something. Think about the first doctor that did a valve surgery in the heart. That was crazy, but he did it and he had the courage to do it. I don't think we are living, and this is part of the reason that I was speaking at the Senate, we are not living in a world where we can do the valve surgery anymore or bring on cardiac catheterization or because here we are as physicians stopped from doing fecal transplant, it needs to be a pharmaceutical product. Well, I challenge that to say, maybe it needs to be a pharmaceutical product for C. diff, but I don't think it's a pharmaceutical product for all diseases because all diseases are different and all humans are different with those diseases. And I think it's going to become much like a blood transfusion where you're going to have a specialized blood for A positive, a specialized blood for B, for O, etc. So I think it's the same thing for disease. So I think it's going to have to come back to the doctors to do it because it's like a blood transfusion. Do we have a blood transfusion in a capsule? We don't. It's the practice of medicine. So that's why I'm kind of out there and I'm challenging all this because I really feel it needs to come back. Fecal transplant needs to come back to the doctors as a research tool so that we can kind of say with certainty, this is the microbe that's safe. This is the microbe that's not safe. This is a microbe that's a bad microbe at this level, etc.
It's funny because I've been treating Lyme for many decades, chronic Lyme disease in children. And I can tell you 20 years ago, a mom did a fecal transplant on her son and a kid, not my recommendation. I don't recommend home auto transfusions of poop. This is not medical advice, people. Let's be clear. I'm with you, Sabine, on that. But anyway, she did it. Her son was literally dying. And we tried everything. He had the worst microbiome and she did it on her own. And he recovered. She checked her poop first. It was her poop because family members are better. And he recovered. And in a kid who was failing all therapeutics, right, left, alternative, holistic,
Yes.
pharmaceutical. So
And,
I know you've been an FMT forever, your baby. I would
and so that's, yeah, so that's why I do it for those people that are on the, at the end of the rope. But I do it with the FDA for conditions like cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, because it needs FDA oversight, unfortunately, right now. I will tell you that 20 years ago, the poop of 20 years ago of donors and the poop of today is completely different.
oh,
And unfortunately, good luck finding a good donor. Out of 4,000 samples, again, I have four that I would say, you know what, I could use those four as good donors.
I have a baby who is 2, who is going where I know she's going to be a great donor. I wanted to send her to you because she's not been vaccinated, all organic, solely breastfed, no dairy, no gluten, amazing mom. This mom is amazing, but and no spike. Well, as far as I can tell, because I'm worried about all stool having spike now, because I think we've all been spiked, but that's something else. Well, maybe it's not something else. Problem is,
we definitely test for that. And, here's the thing, the main microbes that are concerning are, carbapenem resistant E. coli, vancomycin resistant E. coli, ESBL. And the problem is that it's not readily available to test them. We test them in our lab because we have a cap and clear lab, but it's not readily available for parents to test that. And if you see the 2 cases of mortality from fecal transplant, they were positive either for VRE or ESBL. So, the poop of 20 years ago and the poop of today in donors, I'll tell you, I have people come to me all the time, non-vaccinated, beautiful, newborn, organic, blah, blah, blah. And then I find E. coli in their stools, or and I can't give that stool to a patient that's immunosuppressed because I'm going to kill them. It's too.
do you have
Or
frozen?
I find Giardia.
Yeah. Do you have frozen stool samples from 20 years ago?
Yes. Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
Okay. Well, and you could probably grow those stools. I mean, you could propagate them.
Here's the thing. Is it the right stool donor of 20 years ago? Was that? Yeah. I mean, and the process of the freezing, is it frozen? Is it still good? Is it still, so it's complicated. It's complex. So my whole movement right now is really preserve what we have, map what we have, so we can at least, we're going to have destructions. We're going to continue having wars, which is affecting the microbiome. We're going to have people doing stupid stuff, glyphosates, all that,
Yeah.
right? So, let's at least preserve what we have and understand what we have, so we could say, hey, these microbes have disappeared. How do we grow them back? And the other thing is, as we are seeing the disappearance of bifidobacteria, that's my whole, slogan of save the BIF. We need to really understand, how do we restore the BIF? How do we restore the BIF? Not with probiotics, because it doesn't work for everybody, or vitamins, but also, what else is killing the BIF other than the glyphosates, other than the preservatives in the food? What else is doing it other than the messenger RNA vaccine that we picked up on, right? So I think it's important to start, I'll tell you, I've kind of I took it upon myself to start I told you I test my stools on a regular basis. Even a cream that I put on my face, I retest my stools to see, did it affect my microbiome? Did I kill my bifidobacteria by putting this cream full of turmeric on my skin, or did it improve it, right? Or oil, or and I'm very, very cautious when I do these stool tests, because I don't change the diet. I'm the same diet, same level of calmness. But then I could see, if I'm stressed, if I get into a fight with someone, if I'm annoyed, is it killing my microbiome? If there's so many. If I'm laughing, is it improving my microbiome? If
Mhm.
I'm eating one glass of wine, is it improving or killing? If I'm drinking a prebiotic drink, is it improving or killing? If I'm eating this yogurt, is improving or killing? So I think it's so important. I've come to rely on my lab testing, and I tell everybody it's a research tool because it does help me to see if I'm on the right path, right? So
Mhm.
for autistic kids, I go different methods, especially, we've noticed that kids with autism have zero bifidobacteria, but some of them have a little bit. So sometimes you can get lucky and you can say, you know what, let me give vitamin C and see if it changes the kid. And sometimes it does because they were low enough, but they started climbing and then you got them higher again, right?
Maybe you can just talk about that a little bit because the audience may not know about this relationship. And I know you have a paper about it regarding bifido and vitamin C, which I loved because, I'm all about vitamin C. And I want to talk about vitamin C for a sec because it's so important for bifido. Can you just comment on that, Sabine, why
So we
that's
noticed that
important?
vitamin C increases the bifidobacteria within 24 hours of taking it. It doesn't increase it 48 hours or 72. It kind of goes up, it goes down, goes up, goes down. As you give vitamin C, it goes up, then goes down. So after 48 hours, but we did notice that it increases the bifidobacteria. The key is really to engraft that bifidobacteria, right? Because it's one thing to increase it, it's another thing to implant it, right? It's kind of like, I'm going to give the analogy of gardening, right? I'm gardening and I'm planting some seeds, but there's a tornado that goes around, the seeds disappear. But then
Mhm.
I replant the seeds and then I let peaceful environment and the terrain and the rain and the water grow. And then my tomatoes eventually grow. It's the same kind of thing with the microbiome. What I'm noticing a lot of times what happens, and unfortunately, the science and medicine is not there yet to guide doctors on how to treat these kids. But what I'm noticing is too often the physician may be in the right direction of healing, but then mom gets nervous, anxious, and changes direction. And now you've just killed what was going to be a new garden in that kid. But mom was not patient enough, or the doctor was not patient and tried multiple things. I think, in the microbiome space, it's really about peaceful gardening and just seeing the growth of these microbes and letting them implant and engraft. So
So, I just want a couple. I know I've kept you here for a while. A couple points here. I just want to let people know, folks know, because vitamin C now, the ascorbic acid vitamin C is synthetic. It's a synthetic GMO ascorbic. So you have to take your vitamin C from either the camu or rose hips. It has to be food based. So your vitamin C is best to be food based. So I know synthetic biology. It's everywhere. Not my
So
favorite.
the test that we do, the vitamin C that we used is called Biome Boosters, and
Tell us
we
about the
test.
volume boosters. Yeah, because I
Yeah,
saw it on your
so we
website.
test we test all those products, and so those studies on vitamin C, bovine immunoglobulins, those were from that. And just so nobody says, "Oh my God, Doctor, he's in selling vitamins." These vitamins are sold for the foundation to continue the research, because believe me, it's very difficult to pay for all this research and to continue doing all this research. So, but that was the vitamin C that we tested. It's a good company that makes them and they're pure and there's no arsenic. Because that was my biggest concern, was really some vitamin C's have arsenic in them. Much like, by the way, 90% of chocolates on the market. So that's one of the history that I take with my kids. I always ask mom, because we're trying to grow the bifidobacteria, right? And I say, does your kid eat chocolate? So I remove chocolate from my list because 90% of chocolates have arsenic. I can tell you arsenic is not good for the microbiome.
And in my new book, we tell people how to get arsenic out of like common foods because I'm worried about arsenic toxicity too and heavy metals. are not good for the microbiome. We've known like mercury kills off the microbiome. We've known that, oh, in about 60, 80 years, we used to use it as an antiseptic, and it's in, infant formula, and as well as other foods. But I didn't want to get this talk today too complicated, but we have to remove the toxic load, as you said. And of course, please check out Dr. Hazan's product here. And I support it because I agree, this work is enormously expensive. Getting us to do these podcasts is expensive. Me borrowing your precious time to educate our audiences. What we're trying to do is educate eaters. One point I want to make about probiotics.
By the way, I'm here in Vegas to educate doctors, because guess what? It's not all about me. It's about passing the torch for others to learn from me what I've discovered, right? And I challenge everyone to just look for yourself. I love working with physicians that are like you, because you understand what's out there. And you may have a different formula or a different approach that you saw works. And God bless you for that, because that's where the innovation. I have my own innovations, but that doesn't mean, I'm going to fix everybody. But here you come in with a recipe. It's like, every restaurant has different foods, and we should encourage everyone to cook differently, right? So I encourage physicians to do the recipe differently of how they want to heal their patients. I encourage them to develop products to be out there, but test, make sure, look at what you're doing and test properly, because unfortunately, like I said, there's a lot of bad science out there, and that's what needs to be done.
I have to applaud that first. So thank you for talking to other doctors, because mainstream medicine does not teach this. So we need innovators and curious thinkers like Dr. Hazan to come over and set folks straight on the reality. Number one. Number two is, I just want to make a mention about probiotics. I make my own. I take probiotic capsules, put in coconut milk. I add inulin, and then I heat it for 24 hours at 100 degrees. And I base it on the work of the guy who wrote Wheat Belly, the cardiologist, Dr. Edward. Oh, he's going to kill me. I love his books. They're behind me. Anyway, that guy, the Wheat Belly guy, that's where I got the formulas from. So I take my favorite probiotics and I ferment them further, because we want the fermentation or the products of the microbes, which is what we want to eat. I'm all about fermented foods, whether folks can eat kimchi, kefir, apple cider vinegar, acetobacter.
By the way, Michelle, I need to test your microbiome.
Oh, please test my microbiome, because I have a batch of sauerkraut I just made.
Okay, so do it after you eat the yogurt. Let's test it.
Oh, I'll do that. I'm going to make my kids are coming to town, so I'm making a fresh batch because their microbiomes are all messed up.
Perfect. I'll send you a kit.
And thank you. And the last thought I'm going to have, and then we're going to wrap up on this note, is, and this is off topic, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but I know you know everything about Crohn's. You're a gastroenterologist. You're freaking brilliant. And we know that there's this MAP organism, Mycobacterium avium paratuberculosis.
Yes, I've done a lot of work on that. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm all over these microbes. I have a kid with type 1, and we found type 1 diabetes, and we found MAP in his blood. And now I am treating him for this MAP to see if I can reverse his type 1 diabetes. And I'm doing it with my toolbox, which is herbal, homeopathic, etc., because I don't have him on 4 pharmaceutical antibiotics, because that's not what I do so much. I'm not opposed to doing what needs to be done, but not that. So I just want to have any thoughts you have. And we're going to wrap up our show because I've kept you here so long. Sorry, because I could talk to you for hours.
I did a clinical trial for a company called Red Hill Biopharma, which was, they looked at MAP and they treated it with quadruple antibiotics. And I worked with Dr. Barodi, where basically we were looking for MAP. We treated those patients, and then we did fecal transplant after we gave them the antibiotics. Dr. Barodi had some amazing data on that, and I actually was able to reproduce it in a couple patients. Probably about 8 patients that I've reproduced that I have to look back, but he's done about 28 patients. I think definitely MAP is out there, Mycobacterium paratuberculosis. I think we're definitely isolating it and seeing it in the stools of patients. And that's how I kind of divide my patients, because it's so important when you treat Crohn's or when you treat or when you treat autism, to know which microbe is the problem, right? Because I can give you a new stool transplant, but if you still have, a lot of C. diff in there, and I didn't kill the C. diff, you're going to keep having C. diff, right? Even if I give you fecal transplant. So what do we do with C. diff? We give vancomycin, we give flagyl, we give antibiotics, we kill off everything, and then we repopulate the gut with microbes, right? I think it's the same thing for MAP. And that's what Dr. Barodi and I were doing, and I'm still doing. Dr. Barodi passed away, I'm sorry to say. But essentially, when you see MAP, it's important to treat, whether you treat it with your protocol or I treat it with quadruple antibiotics before you start considering, doing fecal transplant. But again, that's early, and that's at the level of non-pharma, really, because that protocol went under. They never pushed it forward. I think it's going to be at the level of precision medicine, where we're going to need to find these microbes and then treat accordingly. But again, we're not allowed because we are handcuffed in medicine.
Well, we're finding these things and then we're not allowed to use the tools, and this kind of this censorship of you go out of clinical practice guidelines and all of a sudden you've committed a crime. It's not a crime when all else fails to look outside the box, especially in my world where I'm using herbs or homeopathics or other types of natural therapies.
Right.
It's so frustrating because we can theoretically, it's not to say that you can't reverse autism, Alzheimer's, autoimmunity. So many of these disorders that were considered uncurable or chronic can be reversed, improved upon. You've seen it yourself.
I think it can be reversed in some. I think we still have a lot to learn.
Oh my God.
But I think if we stop the progress and if we stop looking, we're never going to advance, right? I've been in the clinical trial business for decades, and there were good drugs out there over the years, but we can't just stay stagnant, because as much as C. diff is Crohn's disease is improved in 70% of patients with biologics, there's still 30% that are still very much debilitated, right? So we constantly have to keep moving. And as much as some people believe that, the messenger RNA vaccines kept them alive, there are also people that believe that it killed them or that it caused problems. So we cannot ignore both sides of the narrative. We really have to be open-minded as much as possible to kind of say, okay, what else could be going wrong,
And maybe
and also like questioning ourselves. Am I right? Am I wrong? Constantly moving. I think that's the most important, to not be so dogmatic and so stuck on one idea that I think it kind of like it blunts us. Like, just stay open-minded to the possibilities. Open-minded to the possibilities of cures, open-minded to the possibility that there are no cures, But I think we need to continue to give hope to patients and to move. Because the moment you stop and all you do is basically, this is the best we have, is the moment we stop and we kill science. Look what happened with the messenger RNA vaccine. They thought it was like the best thing ever, and millions of lives have saved, etc. But now we're seeing there might be a lot more complications from that vaccine. And also, we still have COVID amongst us. We haven't eradicated the virus. So, I'm not sure what we were doing, pushing a one narrative. We should have pushed treatment and vaccination. Those who want vaccination, freedom of choice. Those who want treatment, freedom of choice. Those who don't want vaccination, freedom of choice. And, kumbaya, like, be happy and educate yourself to do an informed consent, right? From what you've learned on the glyphosates and the vaccines and the aluminum and the mercury, you knew from the get-go that you didn't want to get vaccinated, right? You took it upon yourself to say, you know what? I'm good. I'm about the microbiome. I'm about gut health. I know what I'm going to do. I'm not going to be scared of this virus. But at the same time, you've done everything in your power to educate yourself. But
Mhm.
the 300-pound woman that lives in Chicago and has 10 kids and, eats McDonald's French fries and junk food because she cannot afford anything, she doesn't have, and she's doing 3 jobs to maintain her 10 kids. She doesn't have the luxury of educating herself.
Yeah.
And so to that person, that was the right call for her. You know what I mean? So I think we need to be, I think what's happened is the world has divided us in so many
Mhm.
ways to sell products and to create fear, that we need to stop the fear and say, you know what? Good for you. You want to do this for you? Good for you. Let me know how it works, right? I'm going to do this for me because I'm informed. I've consented. I've done, God knows I've done my research. You know what I mean? So when I do my research and I see something different than the narrative, when I see somebody telling me the vaccine stays in the deltoid, when I see some technology was incorporated in the vaccines, I question. When I see an animal study that's 1 week, they killed the animals and they give the monkeys, placebo in 3, placebo and the real drug in the other, and killed the monkeys in 1 week. I go, what did we learn from that study? And why did we kill the monkeys? Why didn't we continue? So when research, for me, with my hat, having done clinical trials for so many years, I'm skeptic and I'm critical and I'm going to ask questions, but I'm also going to remain humble to say, I don't know, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. And I think that's what we have to stay as scientists and as doctors, not be so, accept. Look, I came out with the whole patent of hydroxychloroquine, Z-Pak, vitamin C, D, and zinc because I saw the virus was killed with hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. I felt it was a sign from God because it was a hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, zinc, HAZ, the first 3 letters of my last name. I'm like, oh my God, this is the answer. I'm going to patent it. And then, of course, the lobbyists jumped on it, killed hydroxychloroquine. The narrative changed. It was all of a sudden the worst drug ever. And it was my patent. I wanted to do the research, and somebody offered me money for those patents, and I never took it because I said, I need to see the data. And I spent a lot of money on that patent. And then when I saw that it also killed the microbiome, I said, well, it's just as bad as what I'm seeing with the vaccine. So it may have been good, and it was good, I have to say, for those people whose oxygens were really low and they were dying. And I needed to intercept the virus quickly, to
Mhm.
kill the virus quickly. You're diabetic, you're cancer patient, you're emphysema, you're COPD. It was good for that population. Like, I need to kill the virus quickly and then I need to boost the microbiome, right? But for a kid that has a lot of bifidobacteria, it wiped out the bifidobacteria. It's not so good. So it was not a protocol for all. And that's why I kind of said, no, you know what? I'm back to being precision medicine.
Mhm.
And when people say to me, well, how do you resume speech how did you resume speech in the twins with autism? Again, precision medicine. What microbes did they have? What microbes did the parents have? What
Mhm.
microbes were they lacking? What microbes did the parents have that the kids were lacking? It was really detective work. What was in the house? What was the neurological looking like? What was the nerve
Mhm.
production looking like? What were the genes looking like, right? Is it a genetic problem? Is it a biologic problem? Is it a genetic problem? Is it a connection problem? Is it a neurological problem? Is it a microbiome problem? And then in the microbiome, what is the microbe that's elevated? Is it the sulfovibrio, like, Dr. Feingold talked about? Is it Clostridium perfringens? What microbe? How do I kill that microbe? How do I restore the microbiome? So nothing in medicine, we're all different. We all have different fingerprints. We all have different microbiomes. Why are we being put in a box to believe that all of us need the same vaccine? All of us need the same antibiotics? No, not everybody needed antibiotics. Not everybody needed vaccines. Some people survived doing nothing, you know?
So I think, Sabine, well, this is fabulous. And I just want to say thank you for your mental resiliency and mental flexibility, not to mention mental curiosity, because what you're embracing is the ability to flex, to say, this is what I thought last year. This is what I think this year, because last year is not this year. So there is a capacity for change. And I must say that is something thinkers like you are doing. We're questioning the narrative. We're looking at the science. We're reevaluating. Forward, 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 reevaluate. The second thing you touch upon, which is so key in my world, of course, is individualized medicine. One
Yes.
size doesn't fit all. We're talking about mandates in health. Absolutely not, because not one size fits all. We all don't wear a size 8 shoe. Okay. That's why you have different shoe sizes, people. Everyone's different. And this microbiome must be, just to wrap up today's podcast, which I am so grateful for, that the microbiota of every individual must be, I think, honored, managed in a way with love and care. That you must love your bugs. I've said it before. I've said it with Jeffrey Smith. Love your bugs because they are protecting you. And so minimize as much as we can in a toxic world, the toxic load through your relationships, your environment, your food, your water. Be the best you can be. We don't look for perfection. When it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. We're looking to give yourself the best chance you have to embrace those bugs that take care of us. So any final words for our audience and how people can reach you?
Yes, I'm going to say, in a world that is constantly trying to remove us as individuals, as humanitarians, as loving humanitarians, as loving humans, they're trying to enter us in a world of artificial intelligence. Be skeptic of what you're reading out there in artificial intelligence, because it's only as good as what you feed it and the product that is being sold to you from artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence will not take a history of a patient. It's a art to be a doctor, right? It's the art of talking to the patient, of having the patient open up about their traumas, having the patient open up about, the medications they take, the drugs they take, the alcohol they take, without judgment, right? So I think that art comes from being humanitarian. I'm a huge lover of humanity, regardless, like even the trolls that are retracting my papers. I'm there to understand that they're lacking microbes, right? So we live in a world where we are surrounded, unfortunately, by toxins, but we're also surrounded by a lot of people that are missing microbes. I mean, I told you 4 samples out of 4,000 have a good microbiome that I consider a good microbiome, right? We have to understand that. We have to be patient. It's not something that I'm always patient with, and sometimes I lose my grip. But then I have to remind myself to stay balanced, because that's how I stay alive, right? So I think peace, calm, love, humility, I think that's what we need. That's the new world that I want in order to advance, because the possibilities are endless. Look, we may have an opportunity to go to Mars. We are using cell phones right now to transmit information. Look how far we've gone as humanity. Yes, we have AI, but we can use AI to help us be better as humans and
Mm.
not destroy the human contact, not destroy the field of medicine that has me touching a patient, re, you know, comforting a patient, giving hope to the patient. My biggest job as a human, and my biggest job during COVID, was really giving hope to patients and turning them
Mm.
into warriors, saying, "You're going to be fine. Why? Don't even talk to me about death. Don't go there. We're positive, positive, right?" So I think we need to, that's my message. My message to humanity is really that: stay human, stay humble, stay loving, try to bring love, try to give love, laugh. I have so much, sh.t on my plate that I'm laughing because I'm hit on every direction, right? But I'm laughing. I'm like, God trained me, and somehow I'm still going. And with I don't look at the negative that's in my life, like the payroll, my employees that I have to support and all that. I look at the benefits. I'm here in our hotel room about to speak to a bunch of doctors. How privileged am I, right? So I think we have to be always looking at the glass full, half full rather than half empty, and stop looking at the grass being greener in the next door garden. You don't have to have a meticulous garden. Have a wild garden. My favorite is like, I have garden. My gardener comes in and he's like, the neighbor is very meticulous, his garden. I'm like, I don't want to be like the neighbor. I want to have a wild garden. Look at my hair. Do I look like I want to have a meticulous garden? No, I want the wild plants growing. So I think be different, speak up, be critical, question everything, question where does your milk come from, question what does this do to your microbiome. Be a skeptic. You'll live longer.
Well, I would have to say thank you to not only our gastroenterologist, researcher, all things microbiome, but a humanitarian philosopher for the day. And you certainly bring to the table what we hope to embrace in this podcast: mothers, doctors, and scientists, because you're actually all three. You've had all the check marks. I ascribe to that. And I was just telling our producer, Ann, before the show, I'm a clinician. I'm not a scientist. And Ann said to me, Michelle, you are a scientist. So, and I am a mom, and I love all things animals. So I want to thank you for your wisdom today, your time, your research, your commitment to staying curious, intellectually curious, and supporting, the most vulnerable through our poop. I'm Dr. Poopy Pants Diaper, Michelle Perro. Thank you, Sabine Hazan, for joining us today, episode 42.
Thank you. And by the way, all rebels in medicine are scientists.
So I want to, and one last thing is a homeopath.
If you question the science, if you question the medicine, you're a scientist.
You're a scientist, because that is what science is. And as a homeopath, if I were to give Sabine Hazan a remedy, it would be lac leonidum, which is lion's milk, because
yes,
that would be your remedy, my friend. I didn't do your case, but if you ever need a homeopathic remedy, let me know. So on that happy note,
I'll have to test it.
Oh, you should. I'll send you some.
Send me some. I'll test it.
I'm going to. Okay.
So I always do N of one. I'm always the N of one first, and then I do 20 patients after.
Because homeopathy is individualized. That's a whole nother show. There are like 4,000. Now there's probably 5,000 remedies. There were 4,000 a few years ago.
Definitely send it to me.
I will send you this remedy. Okay. You send me the poop test.
And also send me the remedy for MAP, because I'm curious to see what it does, if it eradicates it.
I'm going to send it to you from the company where I sent it to this patient of mine. And I will send you that remedy, the MAP remedy. It's a homeopathic, and I'll send you both. That's going to be my gift to you, and you'll get those in the mail, and they'll come from Hahnemann Pharmacy.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Well, thank you, Sabine. And we'll see you all next time. And Patricia Lemer is going to be speaking to us about autism, but with an eye on visual issues. So stay tuned for that. Thank you, everybody. Woo! Everybody. Wow, that was a blast. It was like an Arctic blast. I could listen to her all day. Isn't Dr. Sabine Hazan wonderful? And aren't we lucky to have her give up her time and energy to spend time with us today? I just love it all. Thank you for listeners who are present with us, who come to listen to it later. We love you much. And I'm going to put out a handout. This is what I've decided to do after listening again to Dr. Hazan. I'm going to do a parent handout on how to restore your child's bifidobacteria, and I will post it on social media on Facebook, LinkedIn, and X. I don't do Insta. It's coming, people. It's coming. So on that note, see you all next month with Patricia Lemer, another powerhouse, and stay well.